time. Amen. So if you don't mind, if you'll join me in the Gospel of St. John, the 9th chapter. Gospel of St. John, the 9th chapter. I'm going to begin reading with verse 1. We're going to go through the 7th verse. I'm reading from the Christian Standard Version of the Bible. John 9, beginning with verse 1. And it reads, as he was passing by, he saw a man blind from birth. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned, this man or his parents, that he was born blind? Jesus responded by saying, neither this man nor his parents sinned. This came about so that God's works might be displayed in him. We must do the works of him who sent me while it is day. The night is coming when no one can work. As long as I am in the world, I am the light of the world. After he said these things, he spit on the ground, made some mud from saliva, and spread the mud on his eyes. He said, go, he told him, wash in the pool of Siloam, which means sent. So we left, washed, and came back seeing. I simply want to talk from the thought, while it is yet day. While it is yet day. This is a very bold mission thrust on today. While it is yet day. Listen, I had a preaching engagement, and I got on the plane, flew, traveled. When I got to the destination, the person that was designated to pick me up didn't really know who I was. And so as I moved towards him, because he had a sign with my name, he said, are you Pastor Scott? I said, yes, I am. He said, well, you don't look like your picture. A photo was sent with my bio of me when I looked like Anthony and Jerry. Right? Now, the fact of the matter is the Bible has a picture of the church. My question to you is, do we look like our picture? Because we find in the text that Jesus goes back and forth with those around the healing of the man born blind. You'll find that Jesus, the head of the church, had one view of the church, but the church was operating in another view. So the question is, do we look like our picture? Listen. The text here opens with the problem of evil and suffering in human experience. And the church needs to understand that ever since the fall, ever since Adam and Eve sinned in the garden in Genesis chapter 3, evil and suffering have been a part of the human experience. And evil and suffering will not go away until Jesus comes back and everything is made new again. Amen. So listen, since evil and suffering are a part of human experience, God's remedy to address human and suffering is called ministry. That's God's remedy for addressing the problem of evil and suffering. It's ministry. It's not just simply government aid. It's not just simply other folk doing stuff. The assignment that we have as the body of Christ to address the issue of evil and suffering is ministry. Now listen, we need to understand as it relates to this idea of evil and suffering. In this text, it begins with evil and suffering, but as a result of ministry, it ends with a man who is transformed both physically and spiritually. So the end result of ministry, as we see Jesus demonstrating true ministry, is that it transforms us both physically and spiritually. Before Jesus dealt with the spiritual reality that he was the bread of the world and could satisfy people spiritually, he gave them physical bread. In John 6, he sat them down on a mountain because he realized, listen, I've got to deal with their physical need. And when I deal with their physical need, listen, they will realize or be willing to listen to me as I address their spiritual need. So understand that ministry involves both the temporal and the eternal. It is a requirement that we feed and that we heal physically, and that we also feed and heal spiritually. And Jesus demonstrates that. John Murray preached over 400 or 500 years ago and preached a wonderful sermon on the mystery of providence. And you notice, listen, in this text, we see that the church, when Jesus is coming into this area, let's talk about why Jesus even in the area. If you back up to John chapter 8, sometimes you got to teach and preach. In John chapter 8, verse 58, Jesus has been in a discussion with the scribes and the Pharisees because he's trying to tell them, listen, I know you're looking at me, but I'm older than Abraham. They said, listen, you could not be before Abraham if I'm looking at you right now. Jesus said, listen, before Abraham was, I am. So then verse 59 says they picked up stones to throw at Jesus, but Jesus was hidden and went out of the temple. When he went out of the temple, as he was walking out of the temple and passing by, he saw a man blind from birth. Now listen, Jesus was trying to escape for his own life. Go ahead. That's what it says. They picked up stones to throw at him, but he was hidden. And as he was going out of the temple, trying to keep from being stoned, he still had the mind of ministry. A lot of us, if we got something going on in our life, ministry to somebody else don't matter. But listen, a whole lot of times, I gotta be honest, I don't feel like preaching. I don't feel like doing ministry. I don't feel good. I'm not having a good day. But the fact of the matter is, ministry is not predicated on how you feel. It's predicated on a calling in your life and sensitivity to need. So no matter how we feel, if there's a need, it requires ministry. So as Jesus was passing by, saw a man blind from birth in the church, not living up to the picture. Wanted to say, who sinned? This man or his parents? It's kind of like us. We found out somebody's in the hospital. Our responsibility is to pray for them. Not try to figure out what happened, what went wrong, how long they've been in there. Why didn't they text me first? Why didn't they text somebody else? It's not our job trying to figure out why you wasn't the first one to get called. As soon as you find out, even if you're the last one to find out, pray. So the church said, who sinned? This man or his parents. Now the fact of the matter is, the man had been blind from birth. They knew the man had been blind from birth. Ain't nobody been trying to address that man's situation until Jesus addressed him. Ain't it funny how ain't nobody been doing ministry in a certain area, but as soon as the Lord called you to do the ministry, everybody all of a sudden got a whole lot of ideas, a whole lot of suggestions. They got agendas, they got vision, they got plan. The ministry need been there for a long, long time. Y'all not gonna pray with me here this morning, but I'm gonna pray all by myself. Jesus started doing the ministry, then all of a sudden everybody else want to chime in and tell Jesus how to do ministry. Listen, John Murray says that it relates to the problem, evil and suffering, because we all, like the disciples, want to deal with this question, why? They want to say, Jesus, why is this man blind? Well, John Murray says, as it relates to the problem of evil and suffering, there are 1 or 4 reasons why evil and suffering exists. Are you ready? As it relates to the ungodly, evil and suffering exists for this reason. Evil and suffering exist as it relates to the ungodly, and because it is God's direct and punitive expression of justice on the ungodly. So the ungodly experience evil and suffering because it is God's retributive justice on the unrighteous and the ungodly. So that's the first reason why we see evil and suffering. It is punitive because God retributes his justice on the ungodly. Reason number two. These next three are the reason why the godly experience evil and suffering. So notice there's one reason why the ungodly experience evil and suffering, but there are three reasons why the godly experience it. Listen, the godly experience evil and suffering because it is a direct chastisement from God, inflicted on the godly for our instruction, reproof, correction, and sanctification. In other words, God brings evil and suffering upon the godly because it's grounded in his love. And we are not living up to the will of God. So he brings evil and suffering in our life to reprove, rebuke, to correct, to get us on the right path. Somebody talk to me in this place. Then God brings evil and suffering on the godly. Some evils are inflicted upon the people of God, which are not really aimed at chastisement, but at giving or finding an explanation in their divine purpose. In other words, sometimes God brings evil and suffering on the godly because we have become disinterested. Amen. We become disinterested in the things of God. And so God has to bring evil and suffering in our life because we get disinterested. Stop coming to church. Don't sing with passion. Don't pray with power. And so sometimes God is not trying to whoop us. Sometimes he's not trying to chastise us. Sometimes he's just trying to keep us from being so lukewarm. Right? But then here's another reason why God brings evil and suffering, and this is what we see in our text. God brings evil and suffering on the godly because sometimes the people of God need to understand that God has a divinely ordained purpose and means of promoting the gospel and bringing to realization God's redemptive purpose. This is what we see in this text. The man who was born blind is not experiencing evil and suffering because of ungodliness on the part of him, his mama, or his daddy. He's not being chastised. He has not been someone who has been disinterested. The disciples focused only on those first three. Jesus said, this man was born blind and has experienced this evil and suffering of physical blindness in order that I might promote the gospel and bring to the realization my redemptive purpose. It is such that our text speaks. Jesus, listen, sets the pattern for ministry in this text. Jesus is in touch with the rhythms of the Father. And many of us are not engaged in effective ministry because we are out of step and we are not in touch with the rhythms of the Father. The Father is rocking to the right and we rocking to the left. And we want him to dance to the beat of our rock because we want to do ministry to the left and he doing ministry to the right. But Jesus said you got to be in cadence with the step of the Father because ministry that is out of cadence won't transform nobody. It won't change nobody. But ministry in cadence and rhythm with the Father will have the accompanying power to change and transform life. That's why we do ministry and don't never see no change. That's why we keep coming and coming and coming and doing ministry. Offering ministry, doing ministry, but nothing ever changes. Because we are not in rhythm with the step of the Father. We're doing a good thing, but not God's thing. So Jesus has to get them back in rhythm. Because listen, they want to deal with the why of human suffering. The why of human pain. And Jesus brushed aside the why of human suffering and pain in order to get to the more pressing question, what to do about it. I watch CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, C-SPAN 1, C-SPAN 2. We deal with the why of human suffering all day and all night. Experts, analysts, everybody dealing with the why. Ministry don't need to know the why. The ministry is what you gonna do about it. And the church is gonna be in trouble when Jesus comes back, because Jesus said, listen, when I was hungry, I didn't ask you to try to go back and try to figure out if I'm from a single parent home, my daddy left when I was young, whether or not my mama misused food stamps. I don't need you to, Jesus said, I didn't ask you. I didn't ask you to try to answer all those questions about why this family is in the situation they're in. What you gonna do about it? When I was in prison, he said, did you come visit me? Or did you just sit around trying to say, listen, I'm sorry, 3 strikes you out. You should have stopped doing what you were doing. I know I messed up, but have you come to do anything about it? I'm serving my time, but I still need the law. Ministry is not about the why. Jesus said, what you gonna do about it? Now, in this experience, Jesus reveals to us that God is more involved in the urgency of our present tense pain and our future tense potential than ferreting out past tense causes. Let me say that again. In this experience, Jesus reveals to us that God is more involved in the urgency of our present tense pain and our future tense potential than ferreting out past tense causes. We spend so much time trying to deal with past tense causes that we don't deal with people's present tense pain, and we don't see their future tense potential. Ministry is about dealing with folk at their present situation and leading them into a relationship with God through Jesus Christ so that they can live out their God-given potential. That's what ministry is all about. It's not about trying to figure out the why. Listen, a hurting world and a hurting hearts don't need explanations but transformation. I don't need you to explain to me I'm hurt. I know I'm hurt. When I go to the doctor, I'm in pain. I don't need the doctor to explain to me, yeah, you hurt right there. I know I'm hurt right there. That's why I came. What are you going to do about it? There's a world out there that is not in here. And the reason they're not in here is because we come in here Sunday after Sunday, Wednesday, Tuesday, and everything else, talking about how bad it is out there. But they want to know what you're going to do about it. Listen, Jesus sets the pattern and calls us to follow. Jesus is paced to the cadence of God's future. First Baptist, here's something that's interesting as an analysis of our ministry. There was a little boy that was walking past the church, and he asked the question, is God in that house? The adult was bothered by the fact that a little boy would have to ask as it relates to a church, is God in that house? It would almost be assumed, wait, this is God's house. This is Bethel. This is the house of God. But here's the question. If our church disappeared off of 1414 North Glenwood, would we be missed? If not, that means we're not doing the ministry. If we can say the benediction and never open the doors again and not be missed, there's something wrong with that. Now notice, in our text, Jesus deals, first of all, with the challenge of darkness. And we've got to realize, as Christ is dealing with this man that was born blind, we see darkness being dealt with. Now, one question is asked. And notice, the questions that are asked in this text are always the wrong questions. Jesus don't call us to ask questions, but to follow. When Jesus saw the man born blind, the first question asked was, who sinned, this man or his father? Don't ask that. Verse 8. Then the neighbors jumped in. His neighbors, who saw that he had been healed and knew that he had been a beggar, said, ain't this the one who used to sit begging? Another wrong question. But then we get to verse 10. He kept saying, listen, I'm the one he healed. So they asked him, then how were your eyes open? All these questions. And the man's still blind. All these questions and folks still hungry. All these questions and folks still need help. So we go down to the next verse 11. He answered, the man called Jesus, said, made mud, put it on my eyes, told me to go wash in the pool. I did, and when I came back, I could see. That's a praise break. But no, they said, where's the man who did it? Who authorized him? This ain't Sunday service. This the Sabbath. It was a praise break. But they had another question. Where's the man who did it? He ain't been voted in office. We didn't see his calling, his credentials. We don't know what school he went to, what kind of education he got. Where is he? We need to find out why he did this. I'm just walking through the text. Then you get to verse 17. Again, they asked the blind man. They are interrogating. A man should be shouting. And they said, listen, tell us what you said again about the man who opened your eyes. He said, he's a prophet. I told you that already. And then they get down to verse 19. They said, well, to the parents, you know what? Your son ain't making no. Is this your son? The one they say was born blind? How then does he now see? His parents said he a grown man. He just told you. Our whole family trying to shout, but y'all keep asking questions. Then you get to verse 26, and I'm going to move on. Then they asked another question. It's question number 7. What did he do to you? How did he open your eyes? Listen, that's the challenge of the darkness. But beyond the challenge of the darkness, we see, secondly, we have a choice to transmit his transforming touch. You look at the problem of pain. We are instructed to share the touch of Jesus with the world. And sometimes the touch of Jesus is unorthodox. It says Jesus took some dirt. He spit in the dirt. And he made some mud. Now let me tell you why Jesus took some dirt. There are a number of reasons, but one of them goes back to chapter 8. A woman was caught in adultery, right? And Jesus said, whoever was without sin, let him cast the first stone. These same scribes and Pharisees that was trying to trap Jesus in chapter 9 tried to trap him in chapter 8. Jesus got down on the ground and began to write in the dirt. In chapter 9, he picks up that same dirt. Now, the spiritual understanding we need to understand is that Jesus is reminding us in both instances. Listen, in one text, somebody did sin. He reached down, rolled in the dirt, told them without sin, let him cast the first stone. In the next text, they tried to figure out who sinned, and Jesus said, didn't nobody sin. This is done so that my works might be glorified. Jesus uses dirt in both cases to show that we all come from dirt. And dirt is marred, and dirt is sinful. but until it is in my hands. Dirt is messed up until it's in his hands. And so, listen, in John chapter 8, he writes in dirt in order to bring about forgiveness. In John chapter 9, he picks up some dirt and spits in it in order to bring about healing. Listen, Jesus wants us to understand we have a commitment to share his promise while it is yet day. And what Jesus wants the woman in John 8 and even the man born blind in chapter 9 and you and I to understand is that God has us in his hand. Wait a minute. God spoke everything into existence. I'm going to tie this whole thing up. John 8, John 9, and Genesis chapter 1 and 2. God has you in his hand. God had that woman in John 8 in his hand. God had the man born blind in John chapter 9 in his hand, and God has you in his hand. God spoke everything into existence. But with man and woman, he did not speak us into existence. He reached down into the dirt, picked it up, and fashioned us. And so what we need to understand as Jesus writes in the dirt, as he picks up the dirt, spits in it, put it on the man's eye, God wants you to understand, unlike everything in creation, I did not speak you into existence. I made you with my own hands. That, my friends, is why you are fearfully and wonderfully made. That's why you are his workmanship. You ought to praise God today. That even though you might be messed up and dirty, you are in the Father's hand. So no matter how much evil and suffering you experience in your life, just like the vessel on the potter's wheel, when you're in the potter's hand, you can be made whole. You can be made right again. Right? And here's the wonderful thing about the connection. He writes in dirt, dealing with the penalty of sin. Then he makes mud and spittle, literally dealing with the stain of sin and healing that's needed. So somebody needs to come and give their heart to Christ and deal with the reality of sin in their life, that penalty of sin. And once that penalty of sin, listen, we all are dirt. And to dirt we shall return. But dirt in his hands becomes a masterpiece. So I invite you to come and allow him to fashion you into his workmanship. The doors of the church are open. We invite you to come and receive Christ as Lord and Savior. I need